Well, hello out there in podcast land, and welcome back to the Front Row Network of Podcasts, the podcast for people who actually like movies. And welcome to a quick, rapid reaction to the movie that just opened today, Spider-Man: Far From Home. I am Lou, and I'm just jumping on here, talk to you a little bit, just so you can get a little taste. As we've got this movie that has come out, it's hitting theaters right now on the 4th of July weekend, and I want to give you my quick, rapid thoughts before the rest of the gang comes on later this week to give you a full disclosure where they're going to do a deep dive. So, not going to get into spoiler territory here, so no worries there. If you just want a quick overview of what this movie's all about and whether or not you think it's worth, I think it's worth your time, that's what we're going to be covering on here. Now, I'm going to say this right up front. We're going to talk about Spider-Man: Far From Home. I'm not going to give you any spoilers for that. However, there are a lot of things that are affected by the results of Avengers Endgame. So if you are one of the people that have not seen Avengers Endgame and you still don't want to be spoiled because you're just holding out for that DVD release later this month or the digital release, whatever, I get it. I feel you. However, you can't talk about this movie without talking about the results of Endgame. So you may want to put a pin in this, but otherwise, we're going to stay spoiler free for Spider-Man: Far From Home, but Endgame spoilers full effect, because this movie right off the bat deals with the effects of Endgame. And without getting too much into the plot, basically what you need to know about Spider-Man: Far From Home is that we are fairly close to the end results of Endgame. So everybody is dealing with the reversal of people being brought back from what they call the blip, which is a nice, fun little title to talk about. I was blipped, or he was blipped, or I wasn't blipped. And they do a really nice job right in the first kind of 10, 15 minutes of explaining and tying up a couple of questions you might have in terms of the people who came back and the timelines and ages and all that sort of stuff. I won't get, again, too deep into that, but of course, Spider-Man's back. He was one of the people that got brought back at the end of Endgame. And of course, he's reeling from the loss of Tony Stark from Avengers Endgame. And Tony Stark looms very large over this film. That's one of the first big takeaways from the film. Spider-Man is still processing the loss of Stark, and the world is processing the loss of Iron Man. And this whole theme of who is going to be the next Iron Man. And one of the things that I really kind of enjoyed is this is maybe one of the most meta MCU movies I think we've ever had, because obviously Iron Man was the linchpin to the MCU up until this point, and now he's no longer in the picture. So I think we as an audience are asking ourselves, who's going to be the next Iron Man? Who are going to be the new Avengers? Who's going to take this franchise forward into the next era? Is it going to be Spider-Man? And that is a question that I think gets wrestled with throughout the film. I'm not going to say exactly how, but Peter Parker is dealing with the loss of Tony Stark. He's dealing with his place as a superhero, but he's also still wrestling with, hey, I want to be a teenager. And that's what the heart of this movie is. My initial thought to this movie was I really liked how this movie didn't forget what endears us to Spider-Man in the first place, and that is he's a teenager. And one of the things that was so great about Spider-Man: Homecoming was how it basically felt like a teenage high school comedy with a superhero twist. And this movie kind of feels like a sequel to a high school movie comedy, because they go abroad. As you can see, if you've seen any of the trailers, you know, they go all sorts of different places. You realize kind of why in the movie, but I won't spoil that for you. But it's interesting to see the different locales. It provides a lot of really gorgeous set pieces. The locales look great. Everything's beautifully shot, and the action sequences look great, as they always do in MCU movies. But at the core of it is this group of teenage kids that is still a lot of fun. And that's one of the things that I really liked about this movie. And to respond to some of the other reviews that have already existed, there are some people who will say, well, the first half of this movie isn't great, but then it really kicks in the second half. And I disagree with that. I really enjoyed especially the first 30 minutes of this movie, because it sets the tone and lets you know this is going to be a completely different tone than Endgame was, and even Captain Marvel. And we're going to get back to a more lighthearted, a little kind of sillier approach. And so I could see how for some people that might be jarring to go from Endgame with this incredibly heavy ending and this emotionally draining 3-hour film to kind of this more lighthearted approach. But I think it works really well in Far From Home's favor that it comes at the end of after Endgame to give you that kind of palate cleanser. And also to me, it makes it feel more like a summer movie. This is a great summer movie. This is a lot of fun. This is entertaining. There's good action. There's romance. There's comedy. There's kind of everything that you want without the heavier, weightier issues that some of the MCU movies have. And don't get me wrong, I love those movies, but for what they are aiming to do with the Marvel Cinematic Universe moving forward, I think this is a great palate cleanser to get it set up. Now, Kevin Feige has said that he thinks this is the end of, he views this movie as the end of phase 4. I'm going to call a little BS on that because I think Endgame really does end phase 4. I think this might be a bridge, if you will, to whatever is coming forward. But to get into some of the specifics of the film, Tom Holland, as always, is great in the role. He is by far and away the best Spider-Man we've had on the big screen. He continues to expand on his character. He continues to grow in that character. And as Peter Parker is facing new challenges in this movie, he grows in that as well. But he's got a really great supporting cast around him too. Zendaya's given more as MJ, and I think her character just has more room to grow, and I think we're going to see that in future Spider-Man movies as we get forward. She's terrific in it, and she and Tom Holland have a fabulous chemistry. We also get Jon Favreau as Happy. He's got some good moments. He's got some good scenes, and again, we can kind of see how his character is going to move and evolve now that Tony Stark is no longer in the picture. And some of the adult supporting roles too. Martin Starr, I think, steals every scene he is in. He is fantastic as the teacher who's chaperoning these kids. His backstory is kind of dark and a little sad, and it's really funny. But he is really doing great work here. And then, let's get into Jake Gyllenhaal, who is the addition to this franchise. He plays the character of Mysterio. And I'm going to say character because I don't want to tip the hand one way or another. Is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? What is he? Because I think that's a reveal and that's a story that's really interesting. And I think it's a different kind of character than we have seen in the MCU. I'll just leave it at that. And I really enjoyed what his character was about, what drove his character, and the journey that his character goes on in this movie. I think it's an interesting choice. It again plays on kind of the meta commentary of, well, the biggest hero of the MCU is gone. In fact, the two biggest heroes, Iron Man's gone and Captain America's gone. There's this void of heroes, and who's going to fill that void? And Mysterio is part of that discussion. And so I like what they did with that character. I think the action sequences work really well. There are a couple that I think stand out a little bit better than most. I think especially towards the end, the climactic battle, I think really does kind of escape some of the more familiarity of the MCU. And that's one of the things this script, I think is really well written. It was a clever concept for this film that allows the climactic battles to be something a little bit different and look different and feel different than maybe some of the other movies in the past, which I think that's one of the common criticisms of the MCU is like the final battle at the end feels like something you've seen in other ones. And there's some of that, but I think they do find a way to make this battle feel unique. Couple of other things that I want to touch on before we depart here is that I think ultimately what this movie does is give you some hope for what Marvel's going to be doing in the future, but addressing Endgame. And this movie had a lot to do, and I don't envy the screenwriters that had to pick up the pieces from Endgame, create a new Spider-Man narrative, and then still try to give you something for the future of the MCU. I don't think this movie answers. In fact, I can say for sure this movie does not answer specifically where we're going as an MCU, and I think that's a really good thing. I think if you go into this film thinking, okay, who are the next Avengers going to be, or who are if those expectations are okay, I want everything answered from Endgame, I think you'll be disappointed. But I think you get enough answered in this movie that you're going to appreciate that. On top of that, I think you get some good humor. It's the funniest, kind of lightest MCU movie in a while. Really, even this year, because I think even Captain Marvel, which I loved, was had a little bit more of a serious tone. Notwithstanding a few different scenes, this movie keeps a lighter tone pretty much throughout, but also gives you the typical Marvel superhero action sequences, and also keeping the stakes, fairly, I won't say low. It's not a low stakes Marvel movie, but it's about medium. It's not, clearly this isn't a Thanos situation we're dealing with. So it does work on its own as a standalone movie, similar to the others. And it does keep the spirit and the tone of Spider-Man Homecoming. So if you like Spider-Man Homecoming, I definitely think you're going to like this. If you go in thinking this is going to be some epic, dramatic continuation of fallout of Endgame, I think you would be a little disappointed by that. But that's not what this is intended to be. And so I don't think we should judge the film on that. I think we should judge it based on what it's trying to do. And I think what it does succeeds. I laughed probably more in this movie than I have in a Marvel movie in a while, I think, especially in that first half hour. I just thought the comedy really worked in a way that sometimes it doesn't in Marvel. Sometimes it feels forced, and I don't think it felt forced at all in this. I think there were moments of levity that made sense for the characters, and I think these characters are, by their own nature, funny. Ned's a great character, and I love what they did with his character in this movie. I think he adds to the movie in a sidekick way, in a comic relief way, that doesn't distract from the movie or stop it. It's not the quippiest MCU movie you ever see. That the humor feels a little bit more organic, and I think that's to its credit. As far as what else can you expect? I know one thing that you're always going to ask with an MCU movie: are there post-credit scenes? I'm not going to tell you what they are, but I will tell you, yes, you have 2 post-credit scenes. Stay all the way to the end. You'll get both of them. Marvel's back on that game, as opposed to Endgame, where there wasn't anything. They wanted you to sit with that moment. We're back into it. And I really liked the first one in particular. I think the first one really does set the stage for at least the continuing adventures of Peter Parker. The second one, I think there's some ambiguity, and I'm going to really enjoy listening to the rest of the guys dig in on what they think that second post-credit scene really does mean for the future of the MCU. They're a little bit more in tune with the comic books. I'm not. I just watch the movies. So I'm a little like, okay, I'm interested. I'm intrigued, but I think there's some ambiguity as to where we're going to go from here. So I don't think we completely wash away Endgame, and I don't think we completely know where we're headed. And I think that's a good thing. For the first time in a while, I think we don't have a roadmap for the next iterations of the MCU, and I'm here for it because the movies themselves still manage to be entertaining. So on a scale, if I'm going to give it on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm going to go right off my rapid reaction with an 8.5 on Spider-Man Far From Home. I think it was a really fun time at the movies. I think it's a really good summer movie. It's breezy. The pace moves, by the way. It runs a little over 2 hours, but I don't think it ever drags. And I think it gives you enough different things going on in it, and it moves from location to location. The performances are all very winning, and it's good to see these characters back and having a little bit more fun than they've been able to have, because we've been dealing with snaps and Thanos and stones and people dying and all sorts of stuff that we're kind of getting back into the groove of maybe a little bit more lighter tone, a little bit more fun. So 8.5 is my reaction. Spider-Man Far From Home. It may shift a little up or down based on second viewings. I know I'm going to see it again. That's a definite. So if that's anything, as far as whether or not you need to see it right away, well, I think if you're busy on the 4th of July weekend, I don't think this is a movie that is so spoilerific that you need to see it in the first week. I think if you were to wait, if you got a lot of stuff going on the 4th of July, this is not a endgame situation where there is some major catastrophic event that you absolutely need to see before somebody ruins it for you. There are some spoilers that I do think color what you see in the film, but I don't think it's something people are going to be you're going to go on Twitter and find it leaked anytime soon. I think it's a movie you would be safe to wait a week or two before you have to see, but I certainly recommend seeing it in the theater. As with all Marvel movies, there's so much fun on the big screen, and it's a good time. So that's my review for Spider-Man Far From Home. This is my first time doing a rapid reaction and not being able to give spoilers. So hopefully I didn't accidentally spoil anything to you or give you something to read into too much. If you do, you can tweet me at the fake Lou Hair. Tell me, oh, why'd you say that? Or, tell me where you agree or disagree. But as I said, this is just a rapid reaction. We're going to get into it later this week with a full disclosure. I know Jeremy and Craig and maybe even Scott, I think, are going to dive into it. They're going to be able to talk about the plot twists and who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, all of that sort of stuff. They're going to be able to get into, and then maybe talk about the repercussions of those post-credit scenes for the rest of the MCU. This is just me getting something out there to tell you, hey, it's good. I know some of the reviews were a little mixed, and I think a lot of that's a matter of expectation. I don't know what people were expecting with a sequel to Spider-Man Homecoming. But again, the tone is very much in line with that. So if you go in with that mindset, I think you're going to have a good time. So that's going to be coming up later this week, a full disclosure on Spider-Man Far From Home. In the meantime, we've got all sorts of stuff coming up on the Front Row Network. I know if you go over to my feed, the Guilty Pleasures feed, we're going to be having Drop Dead Gorgeous dropping sometime soon in my feed. So go look up Guilty Pleasures, which, by the way, you can now find on Spotify, and you can now, as well as iTunes. As far as what we've got coming up on the main feed, I know we just had a full disclosure on Toy Story 4. We've got a full disclosure on Child's Play coming up. We are going to have a couple of special episodes coming up. I just wrote an article for frnpod.com on the year in movies 1994, and we're going to have a podcast coming out to supplement that, as well as our greatest sports movie bracket battle podcast. That's going to be coming out. So all sorts of stuff. And then, of course, as we continue through this summer movie season, we're going to move forward and keep giving you full disclosures whenever we can, or these rapid reactions. So please make sure you like us, subscribe, review us, share us on Facebook or social media, wherever you're going. You can follow us on Twitter at Front Row Reviews with a Z, and follow us on Facebook, the Front Row Network, so you can be dialed in on everything that we're doing with all of our different shows. So I'm going to get out of here tonight. That's enough for me. Go enjoy your 4th of July weekend. Enjoy Spider-Man Far From Home. And as always, we'll see you in the front row.